Okay, so I just thought that I would record a video, and this is just a documentation of my journey with Min Ron Nee. And me, myself personally, I didn't know him the longest, and I certainly didn't go and visit him the most, but I did have hundreds of conversations with him over the years through email and telephone calls. And so and I did get to visit him in Hong Kong as well. So this is from my perspective, and I know that there's people out there that have their own perspective on Min Ron Nee, and that's fine, but I'm giving you my perspective on Min Ron Nee and how I got to know him and what subsequently happened through the years of me knowing him. So, in the beginning, I was a cigar smoker. I've been a cigar smoker for quite a few years now, and I'm a flight attendant with United Airlines. I was on a layover in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and it was the middle of winter too. So, first of all, you don't have many places you can smoke cigars in Canada, and second of all, it was cold. So I was on a layover there, and I wanted to smoke a cigar, and so I found a cigar lounge there, kind of sort of. It was a cigar lounge, but it was a cigar shop that had a private lounge. So I went in there and I bought some cigars, and I said, "Hey, can I smoke them here?" And they go, "Yeah, you can, but you got to pay us a drop-in fee," which is fine, right? Most lounges are set up that way, to where, the private ones, where you can usually pay a day rate or something like that and get in there and smoke. So that's what I did. So I was in the lounge, and I think I smoked about 3 cigars in that lounge, quite a few cigars. I was there for quite a long time, and drinking Cuban coffee and looking around the lounge. And then what happened is I came upon this book right here, the Illustrated Encyclopedia Post-Revolution Havana Cigars. And I opened it up, and it's a heavy book, and there's like a lot of pages in it, right? So I started reading it from the beginning, and it was like fascinating to me. It was like, wow, all this information in here. Right out the gate, it starts talking about aging and so on and so forth, and then it has beautiful pictures of the cigars, and they're one-to-one photographs. So, like, if you get that cigar, you can put it in the picture, and it matches up. And so I was fascinated with the book. So I'm like going, God, I gotta buy this thing. So fast forward a little while, I ended up buying the book, and I started reading the book, and just all the information that was in there. There's a lot of information. It is a lot of information. And so fast forward a number of years later to around 2016, started doing some YouTube stuff with this Smoking Gorilla Lounge. And that didn't really pan out too well. And in the meantime, so I was like trying to come up with another format, because the fellas that I was doing it with, they got really busy, and there was a lot of stuff that went on where we weren't going to be able to do the Smoking Gorilla Lounge anymore. So I'm like going, okay, I'll do something on my own then, and do that. So what I did is I started a YouTube channel with cigars. And so my issue was, though, is that I would be on the internet looking and watching people do cigar videos, and what I would see is like these beautiful boxes of vintage cigars that have been aged for long periods of time. People have white gloves, and then they're like, they've got this beautiful box of cigars, and they show it off, and they open it up, and they take the cigar out, and they put it back in, and then they close the box, and then they didn't smoke it. I'm like going, wait a second here. This is the one hobby where you actually destroy what you collect some of the times. I mean, not all the time, but there's a good, well, for me personally, I'm a smoker, I'm not a collector, so I'm destroying it all the time. And I'm like going, God, I mean, I want to document this stuff and open up the boxes, pull out the cigar, and then smoke the cigar. And then compare it to the tasting notes in here and see how close it is or whatever, because I was curious. So that's what I started doing. Is I started, now I wasn't doing all vintage stuff or anything like that, but I was trying to get my hands on as much stuff as I could afford to do, because I'm not rich, and document it on the camera and put it up on YouTube, and then that way somebody would have a point of reference for certain cigars of a certain age moving forward, and then long after I'm gone, they'll be up there, hopefully in perpetuity, right? So that's what I did, and that was like around 2017 that I started doing that. And then toward the end of 2017, I had somebody comment on one of the videos that I did, and I'm like, hey, you know, instead of just commenting on the video, why don't you email me? So that person did. So the email, what it said was, it said, Dear Dave, I hope this email reply does not surprise you. I am MRN. I am no troll. This email is CC to Nino Munoz Flying Cigars. He can vouch for my identity. Please keep this confidential. I do not like being talked about in public. Best, MRN. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's good. I'm like, and obviously it was him that emailed me. And so we started a dialogue through emails at first. And we would email back and forth about stuff. And of course, I had a bunch of cigar questions that I wanted answered, or at least have him give me his take on it, and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of stuff out there that I had read and heard and stuff like that. One of the big ones is that somebody wrote in a blog that Min Ron Nee vacuum packs his cigars, vacuum seals his cigars. So I'm like going, okay. That was one of the first questions I asked him. I go, do you vacuum seal your cigars? He's like, no, I don't vacuum seal my cigars. There was another thing out there where it talked about him putting a cigar underneath water before smoking a vintage cigar. And so I asked him about that as well. And he said, yes, I do. I do that with all my vintage cigars. Pretty much his whole collection was vintage by then for sure, because he, you know, most of the stuff was from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? And I'm talking to him in 2017. So that stuff is starting to get pretty old. And so that, he confirmed that. And actually there's a video out there that, because I interviewed Rob Ayala on that subject. Well, not on that subject, I interviewed him. It was a great interview too. Love Rob. And I mentioned the fact that they did that video, because what I like about those guys is that there's no contempt prior to investigation, and they want to get down to the bottom of what the answers are for it. And so I mentioned that, and he's like, yeah, we had two cigars, one we dipped in the water and one we didn't, and we found out that, yeah, it actually enhanced the smoking experience. It changed it. Things got better, and yeah, it was a good thing. And so it was good to get confirmation later on with Rob and his boys doing that, and then talking with Min Ron Nee about it in the beginning. Of course, he said that he did that all the time. And so I started doing that, and I've gotten some blowback on the channel because I'll show putting the cigar underwater before lighting it, and people are like, "Oh, why do you do that?" Blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. And I did in the cigar info section on the YouTube channel. There's a bunch of information stuff on there that you know, ad nauseum. You can find out why I do it. And so another one too was basically doing really extensive aging on cigars, like, you know, long-term aging of cigars. And he was saying how it's roughly 53% relative humidity to 52 degrees in there. And the Sahakians actually did a video on that. And actually I did a video on aging where I put up a video of Eddie talking about that, about long-term aging. And so, once again, it's kind of confirmed. If you're going to do long-term aging, short-term aging, you're not going to do that. No, like, for 6 months to like 5 or even 10 years, you're really, I'm talking long-term aging, 20 years, 30 years, stuff like that. Low temperature, low relative humidity for long-term aging. And so we talked about that. And then the Monahiba blog, where it came out, where there was a bunch of questions that he was asked, and then they were answered in that blog. And we kind of went over some things like that, and just, it was a wealth of information on there. It was fascinating to talk to him about that. And we talked about his book. And so the reason that he came out with that book was because there was really no information out there at all on Cuban cigars, really none whatsoever. There was like the old Davidoff books and some other stuff like that, but nothing that really went into depth on Cuban cigars. So that's what he did. He went to Cuba, talked with people there, got a bunch of information, had Adriano Martinez helped them with stuff there, and so on and so forth. And he put together the book in roughly a year. He told me, like, it's a little over a year that he put that book together, and which is amazing. If you look inside the book, I mean, there's just the pictures but he self-published it, and so it took him about a year to do that. And it was, at the time, I don't know if Habanos SA has distributed any other books through Habanos SA, but that was the only book that had ever been distributed through Habanos SA. So that was something in itself as well. And also, the book, basically, so here he is, he goes to Cuba, gets the information, puts it down on paper, self-publishes a book, distributes it through Habanos SA, and he gets the princely sum of $30 a copy per book for his book. $30 a copy. And then they were distributed, and then the LCDHs would tack on another $30, so this book was originally selling for $60. That's how much that book sold for back in the day. So he really wasn't doing it to get rich or anything like that. And so it's pretty amazing what he did to put something out into the world that was just pretty awesome, right? It really is. It was for its time and everything like that. It's 20 years later. Of course, the stuff that he was documenting was back in the day, and now with Alex Groom's book, that's the documentation of the stuff 20 years later after his book. And so that's pretty good, pretty nice, pretty awesome thing that he did. Now, another thing too is the fact that I think because of that book, people really started getting more into aging cigars. There was a really great interview that I heard or I watched with James Suckling, and James Suckling said that when he was living in London, that he would smoke all the old cigars in the bargain bin, and that everybody else is smoking all the new cigars. So that tells me that people really weren't thinking of aging. I mean, not the majority of people, let's just say that. There were people out there that were tucking stuff away, collecting it, aging it, and so on and so forth. But I don't think the general population really thought about aging cigars until this book came out, which talks about the various maturation processes in cigars. And there's 3 maturation periods. There's sick periods. There's the vacuum periods in there, all with aging cigars. And then he had in his notes on there that, like, hey, this cigar, you want at least 3 to 5 years of age on that cigar before you start smoking it, and so on and so forth, right? And that was, I think, very kind of controversial, or what you want to say, or revolutionary, whatever, that people, the general population of people didn't really embrace that, so to speak. But over time, people have. There's people out there now that are, a lot of people out there now that are buying stuff, and they find that when you age your cigars, they seem to taste better than when they're fresh. Go figure. But I think that that book was definitely a contribution to that as well. So anyway, it's 2017, 2018, and originally it's cigar stuff, but then we start talking about more personal things and stuff like that. Now, mind you, he was Cantonese, and so you would think that there might have been somewhat of a language barrier there or something like that, that where he couldn't write or read or talk that well. But I never really had a problem understanding him on the phone. When I would talk to him on the phone, we would talk probably at least 2 Sundays out of the month, if not more. And then there would be times during the week we would call each other on the phone and talk. And I never really had a problem with him communicating with me whatsoever. He didn't need a proxy or anything like that to communicate. So I think that there was some rumors out there, because he would always ask me, you have a hard time understanding me or anything like that, because I guess maybe people were saying that he couldn't talk or whatever. I don't know, but I never had an issue with that. So another thing, I found out that he was a doctor. Dr. Nip was his name, and he I just recently saw where somebody said he was a brain surgeon. Now, according to everything that I know, which I could be wrong, but he never was a brain surgeon. But what he did do is he had a clinic in Kowloon where he would help people with various diseases and whatnot, and ailments and stuff that were like kind of like your hard cases, where he would take them on and he would help cure these people. And that's what he did in that clinic in Kowloon. That's what he was doing there. So brain surgery, I don't think so. But I don't know. Maybe there is. But I'm just telling you from my perspective, I never heard that he was a brain surgeon. So there it is there. So we developed this relationship over the years, and toward the end of 2018, he just mentioned to me, he's like, hey, so when are you going to come out and visit me? And I'm like, well, I mean, when do you want me to come visit you? And so we kind of decided that around March or somewhere around there would be a good time to come visit him. And so it was like, okay, so I could prepare stuff and so on and so forth. And at that time, too, people were, because Nino had, years previous, there was talk about the second edition, and they had made those bamboo cases. There was a bunch of pre-orders for the second edition, and so on and so forth. There was a great article on Flying Cigar where Nino was talking about how he procured 4 boxes for the pictures in the second edition. And so people were, it was kind of like with Alex's book, where people put the orders in on Kickstarter or whatever it was, and then there was no book. Where's the book? We put this money in, where's the book? And so I talked with Alex on that, and it was not in his hands. It was the publisher and so on and so forth. So, but with the second edition of Min Ron Nee, he started the framework and everything like that to do that, and then I believe he told me, he confided to me, and he said that when his father died, that it kind of affected him, and he went into a funk for a long period of time, where he couldn't work on the book or do anything like that. That's what he told me. Okay, he could have told other people other things or whatever, but that's what he told me in our conversations. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe just he went in that funk and he just couldn't get over the hump of doing the second edition. I don't know, but that's what he told me, is that really affected him. And I never used to hit him up and like say, well, when's the second edition coming out or anything like that. I never pressed him on anything like that, because it really wasn't any of my business. If he would have asked me to do something or whatever for it, or I gladly would have done that for sure, but it wasn't something where I would press him on it, because at the end of the day, that was his decision and his doings of stuff. So I know there was a lot of people though that wanted to know, and well, the second edition came out, but he didn't write it. Alex Green did. So it's getting to be around March of 19, and everything's all set, and he's like, well, why don't you come out for about a week? And I'm like, okay, well, I'll hang out there for a week or whatever. And so, about the middle of March, I hop on a flight to Hong Kong. And back then, the flight to Hong Kong got in like rather late, got in like around 8:30 at night. And so he had sent his driver to pick me up at the airport. I found the driver, and he brought me back to my hotel in Sha Tin. That's where I stayed. Is it the Hyatt or Hilton? I can't remember. In Sha Tin. And he dropped me off there. And then the next morning, he contacted me and said, hey, just meet me down at my clinic in Kowloon about 4 o'clock. That's when I knock off work, and then we can hang out. So I just kind of hung out at the hotel a little bit and kind of got my bearings, and then I got one of those cards. I think it's an octopus card. Filled that thing up, took the train down, had one train, 2 trains or whatever to get to the spot in Kowloon where the clinic was. And of course, I couldn't find it, but I was able to contact the receptionist in his office, and she came down and got me and brought me upstairs to his clinic. And so, I walk in the clinic, the reception area is here, there's like a little waiting area here, and then out a door here, there's like a little patio area that's outdoors that you can sit out there, and then in the center, there's like this door to his office. So she's like, just go in the office over there. And so I went in the office and met him for the first time face to face. I mean, it was like I already knew him anyway. I mean, I'd been talking with him for over, almost 2 years of talking with him on the phone and in emails and stuff like that. So it was like I knew him. I knew enough about him to where it was just like, hey, how you doing? It's good to finally be face to face, right? So we, and it was 4 o'clock, so he was done working for the day, and then we went with his driver to a couple of places. We went to Cigar, which is no longer there anymore. And then when we were in Cigar, there was a gentleman there that owned a restaurant in Hong Kong, and granted, it was probably Saturday night, either Friday or Saturday night. I can't remember what night it was, but busy for restaurants, right? So he says, oh, you gotta, come eat dinner with me and at my restaurant, blah, blah, blah. And so we find out where it's at. The driver drops us off at the restaurant. We walk inside. He's there to greet us, and then he takes us down to like a little room all by ourselves. And it's a packed, busy restaurant. And like they cleared away the room, and then we had dinner there. And then after that, we went to Cohiba Atmosphere and had a cigar there. So the one thing too about him writing that book was the fact that he didn't want the notoriety. He wanted to be a private person. As you can tell when I read that email, he said, hey, don't talk about me in public. I just, I'm a very private person. And so, I mean, writing that book wasn't about fame for him. It was just about disseminating information and having a point of reference that he could give to the world. And, I mean, if $30 for the book, I mean, some of these people selling these books now are like, they want thousands of dollars for like a book with a bunch of cigar pictures in it. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, I mean, it's a tabletop book. It's really beautiful and it's pretty and everything like that, but like thousands of dollars for that book, it's crazy. Yeah, he did it for $30. So anyway, after dinner and after going to Atmosphere and everything like that, I was actually pretty tired. I mean, I had jet lag. Pretty much the whole trip was really weird. I just had a hard time sleeping there. And so he dropped me off at my hotel, and then I did the same thing the next day. But this time we just went to his house, and we just hung out at his house. And for the rest of the time that I was there for around 2 weeks. It ended up 1 week turned into 2. Basically, what we did is I would go down to his clinic at 4 in the afternoon, and we would go back to his house. His housekeeper, who's a really excellent cook, would make us dinner, and we'd smoke a cigar or whatever. And then what ended up happening was, okay, so he was sending me cigars to help support the YouTube channel, and that way I was documenting some pretty cool vintage stuff. But he would always tell me that, I got a mess of cigars in my house and I can never find I think of what I want to send you to smoke and then I can't find it. So I just said, when I'm in Hong Kong, I'll fix it. I'll organize everything so that you can find all your cigars, whatever you need to do. And so he just kind of laughed at me. And then, so this next night that I'm at his house, he's like, well, come on upstairs and take a look at my mess of cigars. So we go up there, and basically he had converted a bedroom into a humidor. And he always said that was like kind of his personal collection right there of cigars that he had handy, and then he had another warehouse or something in Hong Kong somewhere where he had tons of boxes of cigars all over the place. That was a different thing. But this personal one was in his house, and it was basically one bedroom converted with racks and stuff like that, all down the sides and through the middle of the bedroom. And so we opened up the door to get in there, and it's like the door didn't open all the way. And so you had to like kind of squeeze through. And then once you got on the other side of the door, there was like all these Tupper doors that were stacked up in the walkways. Some of them were stacked up on some dollies that you could wheel around and stuff like that. I mean, it was a mess of cigars. I mean, it was literally a mess of cigars. And so basically that's what I did for the rest of the time that I was there, was fix his mess of cigars. I was in that humidor constantly. I was in there for hours and hours and hours just moving, because he would take a box of cigars and then he would just set it down. So like it would say it was a box of Monte Cristo, and then he would put it down, and then it would be next to the Partagas, all the Partagas boxes. So there was stuff everywhere. I had to like root through all of the stuff to find out where it was, and then had to find out where it should be. And then what he did, here's a tip for you if you got a bunch of cigars and whatnot. What he did is he would take Ziploc bags, and he'd put one or two boxes, usually 2 boxes of cigars, inside the Ziploc bag and zip it up, which is good because if you get a bug outbreak or something like that in your humidor, it's only going to be relegated to whatever's in the Ziploc bags, because they can't eat through Ziploc plastic bags. So, but the problem with that is that it makes it very unwieldy to stack, because a box is a box, and they stack nicely if there's nothing around it. But if you have a Ziploc bag around them, it makes it a little bit harder. So as the time progressed, me being in the humidor and so on and so forth, I was able to fix everything and put it back to the way it was. And then all those Tupper doors, I had to like find ways to, if there was a lot of loose sticks in all these Tupper doors, and there was like insane amounts of stuff all over that. And so I had to kind of like take stuff, put it in various things, and like, if they were Partagas or Bolivar or whatever, I tried to put them in their own little thing. And then he had like, the Partagas 150s and the 1996 Salamone 2s, the Walters in there, just loose, sitting around, and baggies and stuff like that. So I was able to get a lot of that stuff sorted out, but like I just didn't have enough time, really, to be quite honest. It was just so many cigars. But I did the best that I could, and he was really happy that I could help fix his mess of cigars when I was there. So, it was like a really great 2 weeks of my life. Just being in all that history and stuff like that, right? The original, the St. Louis Rays, not the San Luis Rays. Those ones that were distributed in Germany by, I guess, one guy or whatever it was. I forget how he got that, but they were made, but they weren't the SLRs. They were different. Seeing those in there, smoking clear Havanas from like 1952. They came in a tin. The Holy Trinity cigars, and it goes on and on and on and on. There's like so many cigars that I smoked while I was there that was just like pretty insane. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, that was like it was a really great experience to be in there and do all that stuff. And then, of course, I had to leave. I had to go back to work and, you know, go back to my life of being a flight attendant and whatnot and so on and so forth. So I left 2 weeks later, come back home. And granted, that's 2019. So, you know, I'm just like, we're already planning the next time I'm going to come out there and all that other kind of stuff. And then roughly we were thinking, yeah, probably the same time next year, that'd probably be good, you know? And so what happened? Well, the world changed, right? COVID hits, and yeah, it was like, you know, everything got locked down, and I was able to get to Hong Kong on a trip, and I was there for like 24 hours, but it was like right in the beginning of where you had to do tests, or if you were, it was that whole time where like you couldn't just walk in and meet somebody or whatever it is because you might have COVID or whatever, and the tests weren't really all that good and whatever, and so I called him on the phone. He's like, "Hey, I'm sorry I can't meet with you because, you know, we got COVID going on here and all this other kind of stuff." So, and that was in 2020, sometime in 2020, when I was supposed to be coming back out there to visit with him, but I never did. So, but that was the last time, you know, well, that I could have seen him or whatever. After that, it really got locked down with COVID, and you know, we had a couple of years of just insanity, like just right. I mean, it was just locked down. You couldn't do anything, but we still continued our phone conversations and our emails and stuff like that back and forth. And then probably around, I'd say 21, between 21 and 22, he really stopped calling and talking to me. And so I got worried. I'm like, "Hey, you know, are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I fell, got some kind of an injury or whatever it is." And I think he also said that he had gotten sick before that, and so that he wasn't really feeling well, so he was sleeping a lot, and he had to tone down his work regimen because he used to work 7 days a week at that clinic. He would work 7 days a week, nonstop. I mean, just an insane work schedule. And by then, he really toned it down. And then I heard from Alex too that really toward the end, he was only coming in there like 1 day a week, like on a Friday, to see all of his patients. And then the rest of the week, he wasn't working. So it got really bad. Probably, I don't know, because like I said, after like 2022, I would send him an email and try and talk to him and everything like that, and it just never materialized. He would never be on the phone, or he would type very short answers and so on and so forth, and that was it. And so yeah, I mean, I was down in Australia last year with Alex over in Melbourne, because that's where Alex lives, and we were talking about that, and he was still able to talk with him a little bit, but he was actually mostly conversing with Carmen, his wife, a lot of the time. And he told me that because he was just in Hong Kong a few months ago, and he was supposed to talk with Min Ron Nee, but he never did. He went to the house and he photographed the stuff in the humidor, but by then Alex was telling me that he had told him that he was done with cigars and that he was just done with them. I'm not going to smoke cigars or anything like that anymore. So, and it's kind of curious because now that Min Ron Nee's dead, there's like an auction that's happening within, I think of next week, there's an auction that's happening in Hong Kong with all this stuff. So I would imagine that they had been cataloging and putting all things together and all the lots and stuff like that, because Alex said that the Humidor was quite barren. There was a lot of stuff missing and so on and so forth, and it just wasn't like full like when I saw it. And so Yeah, very sad toward the end there. That so like I said, I didn't know him the longest. I didn't see him the most. I had a really good relationship with him for the small amount of years that I knew him, and it was great. And like I said, he never rubbed me the wrong way. He was a very curious person, and he just basically really wanted to know information about all kinds of things, and he was just very curious. Um, and he would always ask me about what's going on in the U.S. and so on and so forth, and give him a perspective because he was in Hong Kong. And even though you could kind of read the news and stuff, you kind of want to maybe verify it or whatever with someone that's actually living in it, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I I don't know. I mean, all I know is that he wrote this book, which I think changed a lot of people's perspective on Cuban cigars, and it's very sad that he's gone. And what more can you say? I mean, it's a bummer, but at least we have this as a memento of him. And I think with Alex Groom carrying on with what he's doing, that's kind of like his second edition. I mean, to me personally, that is. And there was times where he talked about that, where we would talk about the second edition of his book, and he would say, I mean, once I write the second edition, I mean, what else is there for me? Or something like that. Something along those lines, which kind of like suggested a finality or something like that, which was weird. I mean, it was just like, I can't believe you're talking like that. But yeah, and maybe with him putting off the second edition and then Alex basically writing the second edition, maybe he was like, okay, I'm done. I don't know. But I know, I've been very sad for the last few days, just processing all this stuff and just remembering someone that was a really good friend of mine and going through a bunch of old emails and pictures and posters and whatnot, all kinds of stuff. And just remembering those 2 weeks in Hong Kong, too, where I actually got to meet him face to face and hang out with them. And it was really special. I mean, it was it was more like I was just coming over to my friend's house and then eating dinner with my friend and hanging out with my friend and stuff. It was not like this kind of fabulous, like, oh, we drank this and we ate that and we went to all these restaurants and all this other kind of stuff. And, because his wife and his son weren't there. It was just me and him, his housekeeper and his driver that were there. And so it was very informal, which was great because I'm kind of an informal guy anyway, right? And so, but like I said, it was more like me going over there to my friend's house to just kind of hang out and, do, what friends do. They hang out and they talk about stuff and do things and that's basically what it was. I wish that I would have been able to do that more than once, but I packed a lot of that into 2 weeks there in Hong Kong. So, and I'll forever be grateful for that, being able to just hang out those 2 weeks and just, talking with him. And it was great. So it's sad that he's gone. I'm sure he's on the other side somewhere, just hanging out, maybe not smoking a cigar, but he loved his champagne. Definitely. He was a champagne collector and drinker. And maybe he's like looking at a watch because he was a watch collector too. He loved watches. And maybe he's just looking at his watch, drinking some champagne, and just wanting to be left alone. So, anywho, I just wanted to throw this video out here and just, send out my condolences and thoughts on this and kind of maybe set some sort of a record out there that if people really want to know, at least from my perspective, what I garnered from everything that, when I was talking with him and conversing with him and so on and so forth. And getting to know him on my observations. These are my observations. It's not anybody else's, but he will be sorely missed. So anyway, hopefully I'll see him on the other side, and I've rambled on enough, and that's enough out of me.